Hello, listeners. It's Lisa Starr, and I'm back with another episode of StarrCast. This week, we are focusing on a topic that is just so hot: bathhouses. As a consultant, I get a lot of calls from people who want to open some sort of wellness business. And I have to say, lately, everybody wants to open a bathhouse. And there's so many issues with it because they're relatively new, at least in the United States. We don't have a big history of these. There's a lot of confusion about how to do it and all the costs and all the complications of it. So today we're going to dive into one aspect of bathhouses, which comes at the beginning of your project, which is bathhouse design. What do you need to think about in order to create a facility that's workable, economically feasible, viable, has good ergonomics, etc. So we're joined today by three experts in that field. I'm going to introduce them, ladies first. Ali McQuaid Mitchell, she's the founder and creative director of Toronto-based Future Studio, which is an interior design studio. She and her team are forward-thinking approach people committed to creating spaces that anticipate and respond to changing lifestyles and environmental needs. That pretty much describes today. Thank you for joining us, Ali.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
We're also joined by Alberto Carrillo, Senior Associate at Meridian Design architecture firm in New York City, who has worked with Ali on several projects, and the inimitable Don Genders, who should need no introduction, founder and CEO of Design for Leisure, a global leader in designing award-winning hydrothermal spa and wellness environments. So we're going to dive right in because we have so much to talk about in this topic. Why are bathhouses resurging globally is a question that I'd love to tackle first. What do you three think is behind this tremendous interest in the bathhouse model?
Well, I'll jump in there and come in first with this one. It's a really interesting thing that you said there. These are ways. Yeah, how come there's a resurgence globally? Now, there's a lot of people in this world who think the resurgence is not global at all, but it is limited to the movement within the United States. I'm a bit critical about that because in actual fact, there is a growing movement, but it's not sensed in places like mainland Europe, which have had centuries of spa, millennia of spa, and their culture is still there, is alive and kicking, and very little is changing in that scene. But we are beginning to see seeds from the American social wellness scene find its way into Europe, and that's interesting because it's upsetting a few people. And it's great. It's great that to be disruptors. I think it's important that we need to do it.
We're going to come back to that issue later. I want you to elaborate, but I'd like to hear from Ali and Alberto. You were involved with the first othership in Flatiron, I assume, which opened, what, 3 years ago now?
It opened in 2024, so 2 years
Okay.
ago.
And so was that your first bathhouse project, or had you worked on something similar before?
So the Othership brand actually started here in Toronto. And so we had done 2 locations for the Othership brand here in Toronto before moving to New York City.
Perfect.
And the Othership team had big ambitions to take their concept globally, or at least starting in North America. And so we were lucky enough to take on that project, bring a new concept to New York City at the time. To your question about bathhouses and why are they new or why are they so topical right now? Uh, it feels as though bathhouse spaces are not replacing a social activity, but like adding to the human connection of being together in a communal space. Personally, I feel like it has something to do with the human need right now to maybe be away from technology for a few hours. I think it's as simple as that, being able to connect and have a social interaction with your friends, your family, or meeting new people in a new type of space that's exciting, it's relaxing, you feel so good after. Like there's just no way you can go into a bathhouse and not come out feeling better than when you went in. And I think that there's like an innate human need for that type of experience right now. And, we get that from restaurants, or we get it from going to the movies, we get it from the theater. And this is just another way to have that piece of wellness in your life.
I agree. And I think that, with the rise of wellness, it's just a nicer experience to do it together, or shared wellness that we technically don't have anywhere else, especially because, older type of bathhouse, or I don't want to say older, perhaps, well, for lack of a better word, an older model of a bathhouse, it was very more utilitarian, whereas, the hybrid how do I say it, the hybrid model of the newer ones, it just offers so much more than that. And like Ali said, it's just part of the connection, and connect to your community, forming a community which is, different than what it was before.
Well, it sounds like it's this convergence of need at the moment. I mean, the pushback from technology, which was one of the global wellness trends unveiled last week, people are sort of starting to almost overcorrect for being so addicted to our devices. And you can't take your device in a bathhouse unless you risk losing it. So, and it's communal, right? And it's wellness. So it's like just really good timing for these three things. And hence, I think those are all drivers of this interest. But what we're finding is that finding the money to do it is very challenging. In spite of numbers that bathhouses are doing that are open, and the busyness and the cash flow they're creating, we are still seeing on the banking side a resistance to funding. And so we'll discuss that in our chat this morning as an upfront concern, because budget, right? So when someone comes to you as designers of these facilities, when do you start that budget discussion with them?
Really speak to the budgets around the spa and like the cabins themselves. But I think on the design side, when we had a lot of really amazing, ambitious entrepreneurs, like almost weekly right now, that are emailing us from all over the world. And I'm sure Alberto and Don, you're having the same experience. Every country in the world right now is trying to figure out the bathhouse. And it is one of the early parts of the conversation that I do bring up, because there's not so much published data right now for entrepreneurs who want to get into the space to understand the costs. So there is a lot of education that is best done at the very beginning of the process, so that they really understand what they're getting into on the financial side, because they are very capital intensive spaces to build.
Don, I'm sure you have something to add here.
Yeah. Yes. Look, there's inevitable sticker shock with anything that involves heat and water. The problem is, most of the people coming into this space these are people who would 10 years ago would never have been coming into the wellness space. They'd have been opening bars and nightclubs. So they're not people coming from a wellness background, from a spa background. They're people coming newly into this world. And so they've got no real background or experience. Now, if you start searching the internet, you'll find a hot tub you can buy at Costco for $3,500. You'll find a sauna you can buy at Costco for $3,500. So these are the mistakes that a lot of people will do, and they'll find generally sort of residential domestic duty products, and they think, oh God, $25,000 I can open a bathhouse. And I'll have 3 saunas and 2 tubs for that. And of course, then they suddenly realize that America has got one of the strictest building codes on the planet. And you can't just adopt and adapt and use residential products. And, so these are the types of things where we've got to very gently help people to manage their expectations right from the outset. I mean, there's enough evidence around now that we can give people examples of cost per square foot build outs for a social wellness club. I mean, I prefer to call them a social wellness club rather than a bathhouse. I mean, Bathhouse is somebody's brand name, which I'm sure they're loving the fact that everybody talks about a bathhouse. But the other side of it is that a social wellness club or a social wellness venue describes in better. And it also allows it to be a bit more flexible in what the offer is. I mean, climbing wellness clubs are just, they're on the rise and increasing in popularity. So, but it's another social wellness club, not
Good
a
point.
bathhouse. Yeah.
I saw a climbing club the other day in New York City by the Williamsburg Bridge, in fact, and I thought, wow, now here's a new one. But we're not going there today. Let's start at the beginning. For a social wellness, as we're discussing, with thermal features, we need to have water. And there are infrastructure considerations around the water that I think we need to talk about. Access to water, drainage, temperature. You know, we're not talking about facilities that are building on geothermal springs and using that water. We're using city water or whatever the local water is. But what are some of the things that we need to be thinking about when we are a prospective owner planning our venue?
I think we need to talk about all of the mechanical requirements for ventilation, for water barriers, vapor barriers. People fall in love with dramatic wet rooms, huge pools, and glass everywhere. But then the engineers come in and say, like, okay, but this is what humidity is going to do to those spaces. I think that's a very critical conversation that you need to have at the very beginning of the project. Because building codes and health department really don't care about the mood board or adaptive reuse projects. So that's, in my mind, the biggest challenge at the beginning of a project like this, like a bathhouse.
It's important to have an engineering team that's capable right from the beginning during your site selection, making sure that the site that you're looking at is actually viable for the use that you want. Is there a parking garage below? Are you there's a lot of floor drains in these projects. Are you able to put floor drains wherever you want? Do you need to build up the structure? Can you open the structure to drop a pool in it? There's just so many technical requirements for these types of projects, and having an experienced engineering team that can help review a site at the get-go is pretty critical.
What sort of engineers would you ask for this project?
Well, I would say Dawn's team is, someone great to have at the table right away, the water experts. But then also, your MEP team, plumbing,
Right.
electrical,
Okay.
mechanical engineers, having someone on the team or a group on the team right from the beginning in site selection is really important, because it saves you, a lot of heartache down the road when you maybe have to give up space or compromise because, some of those systems weren't considered from the beginning.
I think the team is important. It's putting together the team. I mean, we as a company will help with all of the very specialist engineering requirements of a bathhouse. But we're still going to need the MEP specialists who are going to bring all of that together, and who are going to bring and take away the air from the saunas, from the steam rooms, from the areas, the general ventilation. The people that are going to, we're going to produce a lot of wastewater, and where's that going to go? Well, we're going to need people to take that away. So you've got to work together. You've got to integrate as a team, and it's putting that team together is the really, really important part of any bathhouse development project.
Like it's easier to build from the ground up than to reuse an existing building. Is that true?
It won't be cheaper.
Right.
In some cases.
Yeah.
You have to
I
get
think where
creative.
you are. Yeah. It's where you are, Lisa. It depends on what your land costs are, what your build costs are. If you're going to go and build this, you do something in a more remote rural location, and you can buy the land cheap, and your building costs are cheaper. Sometimes half what they would be in a major city. It's a different story, but one thing I would always say to people is, don't necessarily go to brand new buildings, but that can work as well. It's just getting the numbers right. If somebody's got a brand new building and they got a bit of unloved space, they can't rent out for any other purpose, then and it's the last vacant lot, and they want to close out, it's going to affect their lending and banking and everything else. You might get that for a blinding deal.
Right. Okay. Depends.
It does depend. You've just got to look at every element and to as in what your customizing costs are in an existing building.
But nonetheless, we have some forces at work here: water, humidity, ventilation that need to be dealt with. Allie, from the design perspective, are there material choices that lend themselves to in certain situations? Like, people want nature, they want tactile. Does wood work? Does stone work? What about concrete? I mean, how do you approach the design selection?
The materials have to be super hard wearing. These spaces get used. There's chemicals. There's, cleaning happens constantly with, cleaning supplies. So the material choices are really important. They're compounded by that is the human need for, comfort. And so
Mhm.
it's a challenge to design these spaces because you don't want them to feel, clinical. You don't want them to feel cold and sterile. And so you really have to do your research on your materials to find the right mix that feels soft, comfortable, but then also has the capacity to stand up to the wear and tear that really does happen in these spaces. We do use wood. There's certain types of wood that are, more antibacterial. We use sealers on woods that are marine grade. Like, you can use a lot of materials that maybe initially you would think that you couldn't use. We even use textiles for, a lot of our projects, but they don't touch the ground. They're hanging in
Mm.
the air. They're art pieces. And so they soften the space, but they don't actually interact with the water or impacted by humidity and things that will erode the materials. But one of the notes I would say to anybody who is opening a bathhouse is like, prepare yourself that there is long-term maintenance, and the maintenance needs to happen regularly. Things like grout, like drains, like everything needs, it does break down over time, and it has to be maintained properly so that you get the longest possible stretch out of the materials.
Move into that topic about hygiene and health code and the maintenance of these spaces, because I understand they are considerable. I mean, how frequent? Like, if you've got a bathhouse with a sauna, a steam room, and two pools, can you be open 7 days a week? Like, how often does maintenance need to happen? Because some of these are open long hours, and I wonder how they do manage it.
John,
I
maybe
think
you
that,
could answer that one, but I
yeah, yeah,
believe it's constant cleaning.
yeah. It's
Multiple times a
if
day,
it
I believe.
if it isn't constant, you'll pay the price, and you will find yourself, every few months closing because you've got to put stuff right that you could have kept running right if you'd looked after it. And this is something that we instill into all of our clients. And I must admit that the people running these social wellness clubs are far, far more willing to listen and understand the needs to take care of their property. One, because they are often the sole investors. There's not a lot of money awash in this industry at the moment because it's still in its infancy. And so these people are going to work very hard to get the cash together in the first place. So they're going to look after what they've got. And so if we give them advice, they take it. And I find that much more receptive than, for instance, a hotel engineering team, because quite often a brand new hotel will train the engineering team and they've all left in 6 months. So, that's somewhere, where I think that, you know, the daily maintenance programs, and and I mean I've been to other ship 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning, because that's when I could see what was under the hood, so to speak. Because and there was a whole team there working away, scrubbing, cleaning,
Mm.
and getting ready for the day's business. And it is eternal. It's a part of the hospitality industry, and these places are going to be scrubbed and clean and ready to go all the time.
Preparation and for cleaning and maintenance apply in the design, the layout of the facility?
I think we're always fighting for front of a house space versus back of a house space. I think it's the eternal challenge of these
Mhm.
spaces. Operationally, we know that they need to have substantial back of house spaces so that everything can be stored and everything has its place and there's enough room to do things like laundry and have all the cleaning supplies. And then there's always the battle because we know in a lot of these spaces, especially in major cities, every square foot costs a lot of money. And so you want to be making as much revenue generating square footage on a project as possible. So that is always a push and a pull, and it's using creativity to arrange equipment and cleaning closets where they should be and just the right size and not an inch bigger, but
Hmm.
meeting all the needs. And that's just really making sure that you're meeting with your client consistently during the design phase to make sure they really understand what are the needs of their back of house spaces, and also meeting with people like Don and his team to make sure that we're leaving enough room for all of the pool mechanicals and thermal mechanicals and things like that. So it is an essential part of the process is managing the back of house space and
And to
allotment.
add to that, yeah, we also typically try to include hose bibs throughout the space, which
Yes.
are basically just, connect and you start cleaning your flooring and near drains. So just thinking of hygiene and how we can facilitate this for the back of house team.
Is there anything that owners, prospective owners should look at in terms of water supply? Like if you're evaluating a site, do you need to look for a certain water flow or the height of the water table or amount of drain? What are water issues that need to be considered, if any?
Waterproofing, it's a big one. If we're readapting a building that is existing, we will need to obviously check out what's above us or under us, right?
Hmm.
And one of the newer projects that we're working with Ali, we have an electrical room right under some tub rooms. So the
Mm.
way around this is raising the floor on where we have our pool so we don't have to penetrate the slab over there. But waterproofing in general, it's very required.
This is a topical one because I think I was on an email thread this morning with Don's team and Albert, I think you're on it as well, about, just looking at the number of showers that we have in a project or the number of things that require water. And do we have enough water pressure to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that each of those showers is functioning? Do you need a pump, which I didn't even know existed, learned about that today. So, there is challenges. And it comes back to that engineering team or like leaning on a group like DFL to be able to help you assess if the program aligns with the water supply that you have.
Well, for sure, because if water is the star of the show, we need to have enough of it and enough pressure. And you don't want to lay out and build a building and then find out you don't have enough water. That obviously wouldn't be good.
Same applies to electricity. It applies to all services because it's not just how much water you're coming into the building, Lisa. It's how much water you're going out of that building. So
Hmm.
it's what are the drain connections out of that building? I mean, in lots of facilities, and I mean I'm talking big hotels as well. A lot of the time, you can't pump the water out of the building as fast as you're producing wastewater. So you
Mm.
have to then consider storage tanks, which the wastewater will go into, and then you have to pump out at a speed with which the city infrastructure can cope with. So you've got to cope with that. Then have you got enough electricity coming in the building? Do you have to use which is what we're working on together at the moment? Is do we consider using gas instead of electricity because the costs of upgrading the electricity in incoming electricity supply may well be prohibitive or time prohibitive as well. So we have to consider the gas options.
Mm.
And these are all things, that are all part of it that, to the uninitiated, you think, well, yeah, we got electricity, we can have plenty of it. Well, yeah, that isn't the case. It's so very important to do that. And, when you're on the water side of it as well, it's a case of, you can't even rely on building codes to tell you what to do in a modern bathing environment because the codes in most cities in North America were written decades ago
Mm.
when bathing was a completely different animal to what it is today. So the amount of people that you've got going through that water, your beta load, is enormous compared to what the codes were designed to take. So we don't design the code. We way exceed the code in everything we do because we've got to design for purpose and not the code. But if you designed a code, you're immediately in trouble. It's a case of guests really, really, really should expect to be able to see their feet when they're standing in a pool. It shouldn't be murky and cloudy, and it's not a great expectation, but it really is quite an important one.
Very basic, yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
to Don's
you do.
point, the health regulations in every region are vastly different. Some places
Yes.
treat the bathhouses like pools, some others like spas or something entirely different.
Mhm.
So you have to design with with the regulations and not around them. You have to implement them from the very beginning. Um, speaking of, cleanliness, like Don mentioned, the guest psychology is fascinating. People feel safer when they see cleaning, even if it's in the back of house and it's not even the front house. It just creates this state of mind that, okay, the space that I'm walking on barefoot right now has been cleaned at least, today, which is something very important that other ship does very well. Like I said, I think they do several rounds even in between classes of cleanliness. So it's very like that.
I think you're right. If people see it, they think, oh, okay, it's clean here. I mean, not full scale cleaning, but that they see that you maintain it. What degree of maintenance is required, like for the water itself? Let's start there. I mean, I've had people tell me they drain their pools every week. Is that necessary? Salt versus chlorine. Let's talk a little bit about those approaches.
Well, okay, by New York code, you've got to empty your pools every 2 weeks, but that very rarely happens.
But that's New York, you're saying, New York City.
That's New York. That's New York.
Okay.
That's unique to New York City. I mean, and there are different codes in different cities and states and counties all over the United States. And sometimes we'll work into a county code, sometimes to a city, or sometimes to a state. And then we've got a state like Florida who, for instance, they use half the model aquatic health code for pools. They use half the International Pool and Swimming Pool and Spa code, and the rest of it is a mishmash of Florida's own ideas about a code. So you can't even pick up a code book and walk around the United States and for that matter Canada to say, well, I've got a book, I can build a pool. You can't. So it's complicated. Then the other side of things, and what you just mentioned now about the chlorine and salt, there is no difference. Okay, sodium chloride is what produces chlorine. Sodium chloride is salt. Now, the only thing is that you can produce chlorine out of a bottle or out of a powder or out of a tank and pump it, whatever you want to do. Or you can use a chlorine generator, which means you put salt in one end and it produces chlorine in the other. But there is not a code in the United States that will permit a public pool to operate without chlorine use. How you make the chlorine or produce the chlorine is up to you. But it's a lot of misunderstanding. Oh, we've got a salt pool. No, you haven't. You've got a chlorine pool. You're just making the chlorine from salt instead of buying it in a bottle.
Well, there is the smell you think about, though, when you walk into a facility that has obviously using chlorine. It doesn't smell great. It smells clean, but not appealing, maybe. So,
But chlorine doesn't smell, you see. It's odorless. Chlorine is completely odorless. You can stick your head into a bucket of chlorine, you won't smell anything. But what you do smell are chloramines. Chloramines are activated chlorine, and that's what smells. And that's why you will find that pools with lots of kids will smell stronger than pools that may only have adults in it. Now, chloramines are not just produced by the obvious yucky stuff. It can be chlorine is a real sledgehammer to crack a wall, that thing. Okay, it'll act with anything. Okay, so it could be a hair follicle, it could be deodorant, it could be a hair product, it could be perfume, cologne, whatever. If you walk into a pool without showering and washing, and you've got an added product on your skin, you will cause that chlorine to activate. When chlorine activates, it makes a smell.
interesting.
And that doesn't matter whether that chlorine was made with salt or came out of a bottle.
Good to know. So the more people shower before entering the water, the less smelly of chemicals the place will be.
Yeah. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of countries in Europe that will only let people wear Speedo style bathing clothes in bathhouses. Some places will make you wear bathing caps so that you restrict the amount of hair going into the water system. And that's not them being weird or sniffy. That's a hygiene issue of trying to reduce the amount of chemical they're pumping into the water that is in contact with your skin. So ultimately, they're good practices.
Oh, it makes perfect sense when you describe it. I've been to places in Norway where they give you the bathing suit and you wear that. You don't wear your own. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, it's convenient. I mean, whether or not it looks good, who cares? But I see, why you do that. It makes a lot of sense as you describe it.
We all look the same, though. There's no fashion show.
Right.
It's a bit like the concept of school uniforms.
Hmm.
If kids wear school uniform, they're all equal. Okay, so the rich kid doesn't have the best sneakers, and the poor kid don't have any sneakers. They're all the same.
So it's definitely
Very
democratizing.
democratic.
So cleaning of the water, that's really good, very helpful. And the point we made about guests seeing it, guests understanding it. I've noticed that some bathhouse companies have whole pages on their website that describe how they clean, and I think that's very important and user friendly. Is there anything we need to add here about the guest perception of the cleanliness in the facility?
I think most people understand visual cleanliness, and it's not hard to spot. And you do notice it. You of course you do. I mean, it's if you check into a hotel and there's black mold around the corners of the caulk around your shower or whatever it is, then you're not comfortable. You're not happy about it.
It erodes trust.
Yes, yes.
So it's so important to lead with just like pristine cleanliness, because then you've built trust with the consumer.
Especially in facilities where we were asking the guests to disrobe and put on a bathing suit and be naked in the environment, essentially, except for the bathing suit, in a wet environment. Yes, great points. Let's move on to talk about the flow and design and capacity issues. These are major topics, right? I mean, we've got the space, and the owner finds the space based on how much they can afford generally. Is it 4,000 square feet? Is it 8? Is it 10? How do we then determine what we can fit in terms of bathhouse amenities and how many people can flow through? What is the process for that?
It's the most challenging part, is getting the flow right. At least for me, that's the most challenging part. I think from the beginning, it's making sure that you have a solid list of all of what we call like the puzzle pieces that need to go into the plan. So what are the features? Is there tempered tubs, cold tubs, hot tubs, saunas, steam? Like what are
What
the
are the features
ideal,
desired by the owner?
what are the desired
Okay.
features? And then what are the ideal capacity in those features? So how many people do you want to fit in your steam, your sauna, your baths, your pool? What are we aiming for from a capacity perspective? Because everything else waterfalls from that, because then that leads to how many lockers do you need? Leads to how much room do you need in the reception desk? If there's 200 people that will be checking in a day, do we need 2 people at the reception desk? Like, it's a lot of creativity, but ultimately it's a lot of math. It's like, what are the capacity numbers? How much space do people need to physically change? Do we need change stalls? How many showers do we need? Are we in an area where we think people are going to want to shower after this experience and do their hair? And do we need vanity space? It's a huge discovery session that's required with the designers and the clients before you even get planning. And then once you get planning, it's planning for the customer journey. So, how can people participate in this experience? Are they guided through this experience in some kind of a group? Are they, moving freely at their own will through this experience? How long are they staying in this experience? Do people need to eat while they're at this experience? Do we have, a food and beverage offering? The flow is really a product of getting through all of the puzzle pieces and then moving them around hundreds of times within the space. Because also there's minimum clearances that need to be considered around pools, especially in New York City. You have columns to deal with, if you're in a tower, or, there's so many considerations. Do you need to ramp up, to Alberto's point about, in some projects we've had to raise a floor in order to have plunges and pools so that we don't have to penetrate a slab. And then that leads to ramps and stairs and wheelchair lifts. So it is a process to get the flow right. And it takes time, and you have to make sure that you allocate enough time in your project schedule to get that right.
To complement that, once a floor plan is pretty much laid down, we do egress analysis, right? Because at the end of the day, we need to maintain a safe environment for the people at these bathhouses. So we essentially do calculations, of the paths of egress, what's the capacity of the stairs, how many people can we have in here without becoming a fire hazard. So all of these considerations are things that go into the planning of all of the floor plans of the bathhouses.
I mean, they are labyrinthine. There's no two ways about it. When you actually look at an overall plan, it is a complete labyrinth. Because the thing is, we're planning for two completely separate journeys. You've got the guest journey, which is your moneymaker. That's the live or die. That's the success of the business. But at the same time, you've also got the entire back of house journey, not all of which you want the front of house to see. I mean, for example, if you've got people coming in to service the pool equipment, any of the equipment, your steam generators, any back of house located equipment, well, you don't really want guys sort of wheeling tool chests and whatever through your public areas. You've got to think about those journeys of, look, we might want somebody coming in here any time during the operating day. Well, we need to get them into these places without disturbing our business operations. So really important, so you can get this wonderful, hey, look, it all works. Then you suddenly go, we can't have the maintenance guy walking through the sauna to get to the mechanical room, so it's a lot of work.
Sounds like it. I mean, it's not simple at all. Like a traditional spa layout wouldn't be nearly this complicated.
No, it wouldn't.
I bet it is.
Yeah.
You don't think so, John? I bet it is. I think I would say on average, before we get to a final floor plan of like a bathhouse or a spa project, we've probably done about 20 versions of the floor plan.
20. Okay.
At least.
Can we speak to sort of the mix of front of house and back of house? Is there a formula you look for? Like, I'm sure it's dependent on the number of thermal features and the capacity, but if you've got a 10,000 square foot building, how much of that do you need to hold back for back of house and mechanicals versus the front of house?
No equation for that. I mean, from the back of house point of view, yes, you'll always want as much as you can get because you've never got enough. But you can't do that to the detriment of the money-making bit at the front of house. And on this, one of the things that as a design team, we've got to keep an eye, and we've got to be business minded about everything we're doing, because we can't just realize our own individual dreams here. We've got to realize the investor's dream initially, because if this thing doesn't make any money, we'll never get any more work. I mean, that's, we're only as good as our last job sort of thing, But the fact is that it has to be a really, really important consideration for us. There's always compromises. Okay, we like so much and we're going to get this much. So but we've got to comply with code as well. That's the one immovable object. The last thing you want to do is go through your final inspections and and fail on serious accessibility issues when everything's built and installed.
I think it's also a little bit of managing expectations, right? If you want to have a larger tub, you need to understand that you need a larger mechanical equipment to service it. So it's just conversations that happen at the very beginning, and important to have and consider. That's my opinion on that.
What do you think about the single-sex locker changing area, which I've seen many times in Europe and makes so much sense to using the space that way, versus the way we tend to do it in North America, which is to have completely separate women's and men's changing areas. Are you seeing that shift at all on the North American side?
So in Canada, we actually often design bathhouse and spa spaces with genderless
Hmm.
change rooms. So you check in, you go to a locker area, you put your things in your locker, and then when you change, you just go to like a change stall. That's a private
Hmm.
change stall. So
Hmm.
there's no changing that happens in the actual locker room. So that's a concept, at least in the Canadian market. I'm Canadian. So that's a concept that is normal, that people are used to. Many
Hmm.
spas have operated with that type of a flow for a very long time. When we first did our first project in New York City, that was actually something that really surprised us because the Department of Health in New York City actually does not recognize a change room that is like for everyone universal. You actually have to have a female change room designated and a male change room designated. There's definitely trade-offs on square footage because of that. When you're able to have just one big open locker room, you're able to utilize your square footage in a more effective way. Whereas if you have to separate, then you also have to separate bathrooms, you have to separate showers, like everything sort of becomes doubled that you need to provide. Whether or not the consumer is there, it depends on the local code and if it's allowable versus not allowable.
Yeah, I think that it always fascinates me that New York have got this you've got to have a gender segregated areas for changing, and yet you can have as many unisex bathrooms as you like. So yeah. Somebody must have changed the code to allow the bathrooms to become genderless, but I mean, we're still locked into the locker room. But I mean, I my favorite concept of locker areas is the very sort of European changing village style, where
Hmm.
you have a dry side and a wet side
Hmm.
as well, where so your street shoes stop at a certain point, so that's removing bacteria, that's reducing the cleaning load of in so many ways and all the rest of it. So you come in the dry side, you enter a little changing cubicle, changing stall. And then you come out the other side, and there's your bank of lockers. You chuck your stuff in your locker, and off you go. Then you immediately when you walk out of the changing stall, then you're into the wet area.
Hmm.
But I think we're a long way from getting, I've realized challenging codes in North America is a futile task.
I agree, unfortunately. And then you've got states and municipalities that have their own
Mm.
codes. So, we will see how that goes. On this other topic in design, what do you think about the energy in the bathhouse? Some people want a quiet, contemplative space, and others want it to be social. How do we address that in design to make it comfortable for everyone?
I think it can be both. I think it's, being clear to the consumer, to the guest, that there's certain times of day or certain times of the week where maybe it's a little more social or maybe it's a little quieter. I don't think you have to pick either or. But one thing you do have to be careful of is coming back to the material choices that we were talking about earlier. These types of spaces have very hard materials, and hard materials generally are not the best for sound. And so you have to
Mhm.
think about sound panels, ceiling panels, utilizing design elements to help with sound so that voices are not carrying more than what's comfortable for the guests that are in the space.
And also to your question, and this is something that Future Studio does very well. Zoning through finishes, zoning through lighting are something that some of the tools that I've learned from Ali For example, if we have in our locker room, we have a little bit more of a brighter light fixture, whereas as soon as you walk into the common spaces or the sauna, the light is a little bit more dim. And by, I guess, psychology, you understand, okay, this is a quieter zone. So you naturally lower your voice, so you naturally start to whisper. So I think it's important to have a clear path of the, I guess, the dynamic of the experience, or what do you want your client to feel as they walk the space.
Those
It's
are
also
great.
one of the, I mean, leading back to like your very first question, is something that like culturally, I think people want to be able to talk in spas.
Mhm.
Like it's, everybody's been to the spas where they've been shushed. And I totally understand those are a business model that works. And sometimes they're even, by area, like here in Canada, I find that Quebec based spas, for whatever reason, are generally silent. And so those are like, that is just the rule from the beginning. You are not allowed to talk and you will be shushed. But I think what's so exciting about this new like social wellness model is that you don't have to be quiet. It's like this new way of experiencing these spaces where you can actually have a conversation, a lively conversation. You can meet people, and there's not necessarily a requirement to stay completely silent and inward in these spaces, which is exciting and I think leads to a lot of the appeal.
You're
Well,
right.
I think also the atmosphere that the social wellness space creates can vary during the day as well. I mean, if you the name social wellness, it's social. You're going to talk, okay? But obviously, you're not going to talk if you're going to a meditation class. So they can guide how people behave and react by the way that they program their daily activities. So if you're going to a sauna meditation, well, you're not going to go in there with your best buddy you haven't seen for 3 months and talk all the way through it. So it's and I think that they're self-managing in that sense. But I think that the general idea is that if you're doing something social, you want people to be social and you want them to meet new people and talk and share experiences. And wow, what do you think of that? I, you know, the euphoria side of it is what keeps people coming back.
Mhm. No, it's very true. I suppose if you want a quiet bath, you could stay home and do that. You don't need to go to a commercial business and
Yeah.
expect it to be as quiet as your own bathroom. But maybe I like the idea of using lighting, or maybe there's quiet spaces for people to retreat to. Building on that cultural conversation, we know that bathhouse traditions have roots in many countries, and many bathhouse rituals like ons and hammam and banyas. And does it feel like appropriation, to put those in a modern bathhouse today? Do we need to explain to the guests the traditions here? I'm thinking about World Spa in Brooklyn that is like celebrates that, and they highlight, this one is from this country and that country. But I don't see that generally done, and I wondered what your thoughts were.
Well, you need big bucks to do that.
Hmm.
I love World Spa.
Yeah, we when we worked with the World Spa team, that was very much you were moving around the world. I mean, there's a little Japanese corner, there's the Russian corner, and it was designed to do that. Hence the name World Spa. You're touring the world. But I don't think anybody's going to get particularly upset about sort of cultural appropriation. I mean, particularly in a country like the United States, which is such a melting pot of global cultures. I mean, you've got the Turkish community. Well, I'm sure they'd like to have a hammam. You've got the Russian community, and they want banyas. It ends up, it's so if you're creating World Spa as an example, then you're just making someone from every culture happy and comfortable there. But I don't think that anywhere necessarily has to have a cultural background either. I don't think we
Mhm.
have to comply with cultural stereotypes that a sauna in North America does not have to operate like a sauna does in Helsinki. They're two different countries. They're two different countries, two different cultures. People have come to the sauna in North America from a completely different life journey to the ones that have gone to a sauna in Helsinki. And so we can't be critical, and we can't be theming everything to try and either not upset somebody by cultural misappropriation, but similarly by trying to duplicate something from another country. Do what's right for the market in which we're operating in. And if it breaks all the rules and it's never been done before, then fantastic, disrupt the market that either was never there or has been there before but wasn't doing much. So let's get out there and create something special, new, and different.
Totally. As designers or even like artists, musicians, every person on this earth is inspired by something. The things that we've seen, the places we've traveled, the spas that we've tried. But then it's our challenge to come up with something, a typology, a spin, something that's unique to what the project and your client team, wants to create in their market. To Dawn's point, you have to create something that fits within the market or create a new market, something that's exciting. I mean, obviously we're all inspired by our inspirations, whether it's within the spa market or fashion or music or, architecture, art, history. Like there's always inspirations, but it's important to not replicate. It's important to create something different and something that fits the brief of the project that you're trying to create.
I agree. I think it's more of understanding the ritual of how things happen and where, the places we are inspired instead of just replicating an aesthetic. And I think that's the key difference between, appropriation and respect of different cultures.
What do we think about guiding the guest on the journey through the space? I've been in some where there's like a chart on the wall or a list, or you're given something that tells you the order in which to go, how long to spend. Do you think that's an important component of sort of curating the experience for the guest, or do you just let them go and do what they like?
I think
I think again,
there's
it
merit
comes
to
back to
both.
what are the goals of the project.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I personally, I'm
Yeah,
a
take it away, Alberto.
newer
You got this one.
I'm a newer cold plunger, basically inspired by other shape in the brand. And I personally prefer a guided class than a free flow class. I'm a person that I left to my own devices, I would just jump in for 5 seconds and they'd say, okay, I'm done. Whereas, if I'm guided and, and I understand the process and the time limits and somebody is, walking through me what I need to be doing, it becomes a much richer experience. And I don't know, and it feels a lot better. And it's just, I understand better the concept of what the client is trying to basically showcase with their services. So I really appreciated a guided class.
Ali?
It's a big look. Everywhere is different, and this is part of the fantastic, unique businesses that are coming out of this whole uh, movement. The whole bathhouse movement is fantastic, and you're going to get people. I mean, we've got people who are doing immersive technology. We've got somebody
Yes.
else who's building a music based spa wellness club in Miami. And how you compound it, or what's the grounding and the basis for it? As I mentioned earlier on, like the people doing the climbing wall clubs and what have you. These are these are all people who are using a basis and evolving that basis. And I think that there's got to be an element of education to allow people to take the most out of what you have on offer. And if you take the other ship model, which is very heavily guided, or almost totally guided, then you've got other bathhouses where it's a pick and mix. You just go and do what you want to do and how you want to do it, and different people want to do different things, and that's fantastic. That there's all these different products on offer that people can choose the one that suits them. But the most important thing of all of this is listen to your body. I mean, don't start competing with somebody who stays in a sauna for longer than you, or someone who stays in a cold plunge longer than you. This is not a competition. I mean, we've been listening to our bodies. In most elements of our life. Why we leave our brains in the locker with everything else, I've got no idea. When we go to a bathing experience and expect someone to tell you every second of every day what you're going to do. I mean, you still know when you're hungry, when you're tired, when you're thirsty. But when you're too cold or you're too hot as well, actually. But so I think it's a combination.
I have been to many bathhouses around the world, but Othership was the first one where I took a class and was guided, especially through the cold plunge. To your point, Alberto, I stayed in there much longer than I would have on my own, especially because I was in a cold plunge with a younger man who he was not getting out. So I'm like, well, I'm not getting out. So I stayed in there
The
longer,
power of
and I
community.
liked it. I mean, it was like fun. To Don's point, if I don't want that, I'll go to a different facility. Allie, did you have a comment on this topic about the guiding of the journey?
Yeah, I think it's great to go through a guided experience when you feel like you want to do that. And then it's also great to just explore a space on your own. I think it's fun and dynamic that there is those two options now in a lot of spaces, that you can have both experiences and, really do have truly different experiences. I think it's to Dawn's point, I think it's just so exciting that entrepreneurs in this space are just bringing so many exciting new ideas and features and ways to participate in these spaces, whether it's like music or sound baths or, like digital components. There's just so many ways to explore and enjoy these types of spaces that I think it's fun to just try them all.
For sure. And it's a fun time for you that work in this space. So we're going to conclude the episode with a lightning round of 2 questions. I'm going to ask you each to answer. First one is, what is one thing operators always underestimate when they're planning a project like this?
Cost.
Okay. Alberto?
Yes, I agree.
Same.
Yes.
So everybody goes in and underestimates the cost. Okay, well, that was quick and easy. What's one place in which you would advise a prospective owner to spend more than they think they should? Don first.
Back of house, I said the same as Alberto, back of house engineering.
And Allie?
I would say lighting, but what I mean by that is not necessarily spending more of a dollar figure. I think it's spending time to make sure that the lighting is right before you build the space.
Why? Why is that so important?
I mean, ultimately, people are in their bathing suits or in some areas like almost naked, and it's just so important to make people feel comfortable in this space. You have to put their minds at ease subconsciously. There's this innate sensitivity that the human eye has to light. So making sure that the light levels, like that your Kelvin, the Kelvin level of the lighting that you have is at a level that is comfortable. In my opinion, it's like 2200 Kelvin is the sweet spot of lighting. It is close to candlelight, and it just makes you feel comfortable in your bathing suit. So I would say making sure that you're lighting tasks, not people. Nobody feels good when they're in a bath and there's a light shining on them like a spotlight. So I would say, as much as it is, you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money on light fixtures, but you have to spend the time planning the right locations for all of your light.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. And thanks for explaining it. Alberto, was there anything you wanted to add?
I would say that, like I said before, mechanical systems and waterproofing are the drivers of projects like this. And to ensure a longevity of your project and the place that you're building it, you need to maintain a higher quality of level of these 2 items, mechanical systems and waterproofing.
Okay.
That's why I love working with you, Alberto. Always thinking about that. I like pretty things, and then Alberto and Dawn, to make sure that we have longevity and that everything functions as it should. So, yeah, important.
Why
to
it
have
takes
a team.
and you're obviously a good team. We need all of those components. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this expertise with us, Allie McQuaid Mitchell, founder and creative director of Future Studio, Alberto Carrillo from Meridian Design in New York, and Don Genders of DFL. Great information. Thank you again so much for your open sharing.
Thank you for having
Thanks,
us.
Lisa. Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Thanks,
having
everyone.
us.